Well, good morning, MRS family. It is 10 o'clock and we want to make sure we get started on time. I want to say thank you so much for joining us this morning for MRS Registered Apprenticeship in Michigan. Please join me in welcoming our facilitators today. My name is Keisha Hall Dilligard, and I'm joined by my colleague, Gary Hollick. We are business relation consultants working with the Business Network Division, and we are joined today by Brian Smith, departmental manager with Michigan Career and Technical Institute, MCTI. Please know that this took a team effort to bring everything together today. We have other team members that are operating as chat monitors in the background, and they will be available to answer any questions throughout the presentation today. Next slide, please. So, as you guys know, anytime we start a presentation, we want to make sure that we are addressing any housekeeping needs. Exercise patience with us, especially with our technology. A lot of us are still working from home. So excuse if you hear any fur babies or any family members in the background. Also, please keep in mind that this is your training. It is intended to be interactive. So please use the chat feature for questions or comments throughout the presentation. Our team members will respond directly in the chat. Mute your microphones unless you're asking a question. Also, there will be opportunity at the end to ask any questions, and we ask that you use the raise hand feature, and the chat host will call your name for you to unmute yourself and ask your question. Captioning is available by selecting more options and then turn on the live caption feature. So let's get started. Let's talk about why are we here today. So the purpose is to increase knowledge of apprenticeships. And our objective today is to provide an overview and increase opportunities about apprenticeship. And we also want to make sure that we are not getting into a detailed discussion. We hope to provide an overview of apprenticeships and what that looks like for MRS. And we want to make sure that we're opening up that conversation. So please share your thoughts with us. This is part one of our discussion. I hope by discussing and reviewing, we, MRS, will be able to present part two with a detailed outline about what apprenticeships look like with MRS. So why is this important? So I want to say to you, next slide, please. Welcome to National Apprenticeship Week. So yesterday, the Michigan Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity Office of Employment and Training provided a discussion regarding using registered apprenticeships to accelerate skill growth within the workforce. The dialogue focused on benefits to both the employers and individuals and featured Michigan employers who have registered apprenticeship programs. I hope you were able to participate in that presentation today, yesterday, because today we're going to build on that conversation. Today we will have a discussion about apprenticeships and what that means for Michigan Rehabilitation Services Agency. Discussion will revolve around how apprenticeships can benefit both our MRS client and our business customers. MCTI will be present to talk about their role in the apprenticeship process and to share information about their programs and new grants regarding apprenticeships. We will also learn how measurable skill gains and credential attainment are impacted by registered apprenticeships. In promoting this event today, we sent out a flyer which can be shared with businesses and also with your customers to talk about registered apprenticeships and what that might look like within MRS. Next slide, please. Thank you. What is an apprenticeship? So before we get into a real detailed conversation about what an apprenticeship is, let's figure out what are some of the important parts of it. A registered apprenticeship is an employer-driven model that contains or combines on-the-job training with detailed instruction that increases an apprentice skill level and wages. Apprenticeship is a work-based learning strategy with key differences from other training approaches, and we'll talk about that a little later. And in the highly competitive job market, employers are having a very difficult time finding employees with the necessary skills and desired level for their companies. And we have certainly seen an increase in talent needs from our business partners, especially during the pandemic. Through apprenticeship, employers can have access to diverse talent working with MRS. There are also supports available. Also, the benefits can reduce operational costs to the employer by establishing a streamlined channel to bring new workers to their place of employment. So we'll talk more about this, and we'll also talk about what are some of the components of a registered apprenticeship. But before we do that, I want to turn it over to Gary to help us understand how to use Poll Everywhere, which is what we will be using throughout the remainder of this presentation. Gary?
Thank you, Keisha. So in order to make today's presentation more interactive, allow you to have the opportunity to participate, but also to be anonymous if you wish, we're going to use some polling software called Poll Everywhere. So typically you're probably used to people asking you to put your phones away or put them on mute during presentations, but today I'm going to ask you to take your phone out and open up the text feature on your phone. And we're all familiar with texting, and we're going to text to number 22333. And the message we're going to text is Gary Halleck 496. That's Gary Halleck 496. No C in Halleck, or else it won't work. And once you do the text, you should get a response back after you hit send that says you have joined Gary Halleck's session. And when you are done, you can reply leave. However, if you don't reply, if you forget to reply leave after you're done, don't worry about it. Nothing's going to happen. I'm not going to try to sell you anything or anything like that. So it's text number 22333. The message is Gary Halleck 496. And within probably 3 to 5 seconds, you should receive a reply back that you've joined Gary Halleck's session. So on the next screen, we're going to do our first poll, and this is kind of just to get us warmed up with using Poll Everywhere and make sure it worked. So our first poll question is, have you ever helped a customer with an apprenticeship? And you're simply going to text A for yes or B for no. And it looks like it's working. Okay, so we can see that a small amount of us have some experience with apprenticeships. I think we had like 30 people on a call today. So about 12% of us have some experiences with apprenticeships, but a lot of us don't, and that's okay. It's still kind of a new thing. As we work our way through the presentation today, you're going to see all the cool things going on to make apprenticeships possible for our customers. So that's kind of where we're at right now. So if we were to do this training in about a year, we're hoping to see much higher numbers have experience with apprenticeships. Next poll. An apprenticeship could be for multiple years. A for true, B for false. Okay, so we can see the numbers on the screen. Looks like 81% of us, or thereabouts, believe that it can be for multiple years. Others believe it can't be. In truth, it depends on the nature of the training. The minimum for an apprenticeship is 1 year. However, that's a case-by-case basis. So depending on the occupation, it can absolutely take longer than a year for an apprenticeship.
Thank you, Gary. So, we talked about a little bit with that last question about structured and on-the-job training and how long that can take. So let's take a little time with looking at what registered apprenticeship components consist of. Now, in the state of Michigan, there are 5 components to a registered apprenticeship. Some states have 6, but for Michigan, we have 5. So the first involves the business involvement. Employers are the foundation of every apprenticeship program. They play an active role in building the program and remain involved every step of the way. Apprenticeships are customized to meet the specific need of the employer. So 2, the component can be structured on-the-job training. So employers develop an on-the-job training plan for apprentice so that they can learn different identified skill sets for the occupation. And as we talked about earlier, that can take 1 year for minimum, but up to 5 years depending on the occupation. And that training is done with a mentor on the job. So the apprentice is available to learn on the job with an employer on site. And the other cool thing is that they have measurable evaluation points. And I think that's great for us in terms of for MRS. And we're always looking for opportunities to get information from the employer about how is this individual learning? Are they having any barriers? So be able to have evaluation points and evaluate that is great for us to get that information. And also that's based on competencies, hours worked, or it's a combination of it. 3, the third component is related instruction. Apprenticeship programs include related instruction that supplements on-the-job learning and provides the technical and academic competencies that apply to the job. Now, this related instruction can take place on site. It can take place in a school. It can take place online. But according to the state of Michigan, apprenticeship requires at least 144 hours of education per year. And as I said before, this can take place within a college, in-house, with a trainer, with a vendor, or a combination. This training can also include college credit. Asking this question is a great question for our job seekers so they'll understand what that related instruction and expectations should be, and can they meet those expectations with or without accommodations. The fourth component are rewards for skill gains. Now, apprentices can earn competitive wages from day 1, which is awesome. And as they learn skills, their wages will increase. And documentation is also available regarding those skill gains and when those wages are increased. Component number 5 entails every graduate of a registered apprenticeship program receive a nationally recognized credential that certifies that that worker is fully qualified for that occupation. That credential is something that travels with the apprentice everywhere they go. So if that individual decides they want to leave the state of Michigan, they can leave the state of Michigan with that credential. Next slide, please. Now, we talked about the components of an apprenticeship. Now, let's talk about the benefits to the business and also to our job seeker, our customer. So, the benefit to the business, especially with working with individuals with disabilities, is that it fosters a wider talent pool, a diverse talent pool. A lot of businesses are really increasing their initiatives to be more inclusive in their hiring and also in their training. Also, too, apprenticeship will offer businesses an opportunity to experience higher productivity. Businesses have noted that when they have apprentice programs, that they experience higher productivity. In some cases, businesses have also said that it reduced their pathway for training, and they have experienced lower turnover. It has reduced their recruiting cost. And also, individuals who complete apprentice programs are normally longer employees with the business. So, the benefit to the customer, they earn while they learn. They receive pay wage increase as their skills increase. Apprenticeships are usually offered in occupations that offer higher wages. Because of the communication that is needed during the apprenticeship process, this is a great opportunity to eliminate barriers to employment for our customers who often experience barriers to accessing employment, doing well, and retaining employment. And once again, this is a portable, stackable credential. It is nationally recognized. So apprenticeship training helps employees to improve their skills, which will benefit the company in the long run. But it also is a dual benefit. It also benefits the customer as well. Apprenticeship also ensures that the skills developed are matched with the company's future need. Longevity, that's that labor market information that we're always looking for. This will help fill any skill gap and allow the business to source future managers and leaders for their company or within their company. Employees who have been trained in-house tend to be highly motivated to commit to the company and support the business initiatives. An apprenticeship encourages employees to think think of a job, think of a career rather than a job, and they stay with the company longer. According to the data from the National Apprenticeship Service, 92% of companies that have taken an apprentice believe this leads to a more motivated and satisfied workforce. 80% have seen a significant increase in employee retention. These are all things that we would like for our customers. So, next slide. Let's do another question poll. Are apprenticeships training programs always identified as the least cost service that will meet the need of the customer? Yes for A, B for no. Okay, so it looks like 91% of us said no. And no, there may be vocational education programs or college programs that are equivalent. It would need to be explored and verified. Now, that's my answer to it. So, would someone like to raise their hand to say why they chose B? I can't see if anybody raised their hand.
Keisha, there's currently no hands raised. This is Craig. But if anybody wants to add something to the chat, if they don't want to necessarily raise their hand, that's fine too.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. Now remember, we want you guys to be interactive and share things in the chat, and also please feel free to state why you selected what you selected. Let's go to the next poll question. What are potential comparable benefits for apprenticeships? A, employers who have contributed to the cost of an apprenticeship. B, Michigan Reconnect program. C, programs identified in the Michigan Apprenticeship Funding and Resource Guide. D, none of the above. E, all of the above. 91%. Looks like we're at E. Yes. Okay. Would anybody like to add anything to that? Okay. So I am going to turn it over to Brian from MCTI. Brian?
Hey, good morning. Move to the next screen. So here are your 4 quadrants of apprenticeships. First off, business drives registered apprenticeships. Employers must sign off on all the key elements. So there's your customization. Work processes are 80%. I'm going to give you some new terminology here. That's what the DOL calls the tasks on the job. Related technical instruction is 20%. So if you think about that, it's place and train. Apprenticeships really are the age-old method of training for the crafts. And that's because they use the mentorship approach to learning technical skills. The mentor is assigned by the employer. So it is a proven training system, resulting in skilled workers that meet industry demands. The second quadrant is the area of intermediaries and sponsors. So this is your liaison between the employer and the United States Department of Labor. MCTI is a registered intermediary with the United States Department of Labor Office of Apprenticeships. So that means that we have access to the systems, the tracking, ability to pay employers. There's more definitions on this intermediary coming up. Support services. So in enters MRS, our LEO partners at Michigan Works, and of course, grant funding. So, MRS is not going to be any different. Accommodations on the job coaching, that sort of thing. You're going to see Michigan Works out there as well with the same sort of approach behind apprenticeships. The grant funding is for the employer, and it's through 2024. We'll get into that in a minute as well. So this RTI, this related technical instruction, it's 20%. Originally was called related theoretical instruction. It's the theory behind the work that they're doing on the job. Our MCTI curriculums cover that. Community colleges, sometimes there's custom employer curriculums. So the next screen. Push me forward, there we go. So here is the gem in your MRS service module, Michigan Career and Technical Institute. Michigan's first vocational technical training center in our 77th year. Originally established as the Michigan Veterans Vocational School. Comprehensive vocational rehabilitation for injured soldiers returning from World War II in 1944. And we continue to train Michigan citizens with disabilities for competitive employment today. Our referrals come from MRS, the SBP, and Veterans Affairs. You can be proud, of what you have here in the state. We're very unique. One of 8 state-operated comprehensive vocational rehabilitation facilities in the United States. We're governed under 2 accreditations. One, I'm sure you're very familiar with, for our facility in CARF, and then the other is for our academics and the Council on Occupational Education. Next screen. There are 13 occupational training programs at the school representing 46 certifications. Those of you that are tuned in are going to say, wait a minute, I thought it was 44. So we have 2 new certifications in manufacturing that's been added this year. We have 46 certifications across 13 occupational training programs. All of these occupations and these training programs can be developed into registered apprentice programs. The apprenticeships have been around a long time, and we know the core industries, but the non-traditional industries is where the largest growth is in registered apprenticeships. We're working on building one right now in culinary. So there's a good example of a non-traditional industry. Next screen. This next screen is going to give you the definitions of the intermediary. It's kind of the boring things, right? So MCTI and the BND will be the point for MRS in all registered apprenticeships, sort of the mothership, if you will. There are 4 points of tracking and reporting. It's all the boring things, but this is what it is. There's responsibilities for tracking to the DOL, government agency. And the last thing we want to do is to tell the employer that they need to learn how to enter into a tracking system and report and audit and all of that. So we have the people in place to do that. And when the employer, that's one of the first things they'll push back on. And we want to make it as transparent as possible in terms of administrative workload. And that's where we come in as the intermediary. Next screen. So yeah, we touched a little bit on grants. There are 3, and state of Michigan and acronyms, right? So we have 3 grants that are supporting everything that we're going to do for apprenticeships. My Rain, My Stairs, and My Yarn. And for those of you that have been reading, are going to say, where's My Leap? So there's another one called My Leap, and it's predominantly targeted more towards secondary education. But what you can see here is Leo writing for these grants, competitive federal grants. And the state was not expecting to get approval on all of them, and we did. So the long and short of it is, you can see some of these, there's an innovation, there's an inclusion and readiness, and there's a youth expansion. And MRS and MCTI in the write-up fit all of these. And so we were winning grants that other states weren't. So anyway, the long and short of it is, it's $3,000 per apprentice for the employer. These are employer subsidy funds that they can use as they wish, as long as they sponsor an apprenticeship program. These will be good through 2024. And it is a great incentive, no doubt about it. But it's not the real reason for engaging in a registered apprenticeship program. I mean, the real reason is the employer-employee long-term relationship. There's guarantees that the DOL wraps into it, wage progression and a career path, but the ultimate goal is the skilled journey person. We have industries that are in panic mode because people want to retire that are my age and they can't. There's no backfill. So this is going to be a stopper for some of that, I believe. We talked about, these are nationally recognized portable stack rolls. So let's go to the next screen, because this is one that's most exciting. And, where do you start, right? Is your client work ready for a registered apprentice program? How many on your caseload can walk in off the street and step into a registered apprentice program? So at MCTI, we have a pre-apprentice certificate training program. This is a US DOL approved training program. This is your work ready. It is a national credential. So it is a pre-apprentice national stackable credential. I will say this, on our previous screen, you saw our 13 training programs. 6 of our trade training programs touch 11 manufacturing industries. And manufacturing is your second leading apprenticeship industry. So what we need to make sure is that your clients are ready to walk into a registered apprenticeship program. We have some alarming statistics on campus that students coming here for technical training, 20% can read a ruler walking through the door, and I could go on. But what I want to stand on here is this beautiful pre-apprentice certificate training program. The key points in here are 4 bullet points. I don't have to read them to you, but I can tell you I've heard time and time again from employers. I need math, I need blueprint reading, I need somebody that knows how to work with tools. So the beauty behind all of this, we're not the only ones hearing this. We have the DOL from a federal level partnering with creating curriculums that are nationally recognized with credentials that are going to lift the skills up and make sure that somebody's ready. So here's your pathway. If you have a customer that is thinking about apprenticeships and they don't know where to start and they need an on-ramp, this is your program. It's integrated into our enrollments, so there'll be 4 enrollments a year. There's an option to go right into an apprenticeship program with this. That's really all you need. Or if we see, that skills, someone has not reached their maximum potential, it's a perfect way to advance into occupational training here, advanced occupational training at the school. I think that's it. Sure would like to take some questions if anybody has any. What's the next screen, Gary? Or Tyler?
Brian, I have a question. This is Gary.
Sure.
And it's because it's a question that I've had people ask me, businesses ask me, as well as you and I have had this conversation a couple times. I think it's important. From an intermediary perspective, MCTI can be an intermediary and not actually be part of the RTI for apprenticeships, correct?
Right. I'm glad you asked that question. Now, we would prefer to be part of it because, we've probably worked with the students, but it is not a deal breaker by any means. So as an intermediary, we are going to support our customers, whether they're enrolled at MCTI or not. If they're an MRS customer, we will support that. And so we did talk to an employer that's interested in this approach, but has a solid relationship with a community college. I mean, so solid that this community college has created a custom training program for them, and they don't want to deviate from that. And so there's no requirement that they would have to deviate from that. We will still support them and operate as an intermediary for their apprenticeship.
Thank you.
And you used an abbreviation. Do you want to tell people what our RTI is?
Yeah, so our RTI is just related technical instruction. It's 20% of the apprenticeship. It's the academic piece. It's all of our curriculums or parts of our curriculum. It's classes at a community college, but the DOL has some acronyms, and I'm sure as state employees, we can all appreciate that. And one is RTI, related technical instruction. The other is WP, work processes. Those are just your tasks on the job.
And Brian, you talked about the pre-apprenticeship certificate that is registered through the USDOL. Is this
Correct.
common, pre-apprenticeships? How unusual is this?
It's new. It's relatively new. I can say, working with Leo and some of the behind the scenes with all of these grant funds, is there's an approach to create this called the MARC, the Michigan Apprenticeship Readiness Certificate. And so there's a few of these out here, and I'm not sure how they're going to launch this MARC, but there is definitely a need for a pre-apprenticeship. And this one's relatively new, but it fit what we do here well. You may have heard of MC3. That's big in Southeast Michigan. It's used a lot by the trades. When I say trades, I mean the heavy operating trades, the machinists, the carpenters, and the millwrights, and that. They have MC3, and there's another one out there. So they're popping up, and they're relatively new. And that's simply because the youth today, unfortunately, were squeezed out of secondary opportunities for hands-on training when high schools decided that they're going to close auto shops and wood shops because everybody gets a 4-year degree, right? And so now we're realizing, right, that that's not the right move, and schools are backpedaling. But what that means is we have a lot of students that have never held a hammer. They don't know what a Phillips head is. And so this is why you're seeing pre-apprenticeships in these certificate programs popping up, because we need to close these entry-level skill gaps, right? You need to learn how to read a tape measure, and you need to know how to read a print and do some trade math. And oh yeah, there is some power tools, so we got to not be afraid of power tools. So there is a lot to do, but this is a critical piece. And I can't emphasize this enough. We've had it under our roof here for a while. We lost it a year and a half, maybe 2 years to COVID for the most part. So I'm not sure how prevalent this information is to the field. So it's a long answer to your question, but they are popping up, and the state's looking at creating a mark, Michigan Apprenticeship Readiness Certificate. More to come on that one.
Hey, Brian, this is Craig. We did have a question in the chat about would the mark count for MSG or CA for MRS customers? And I know we're going to go into a little bit about MSG and CA here in a few slides, but if you could just give us an answer on that with the mark.
Yeah, you know, so the mark is just in its infancy. There's a group discussing it. The group out of Southeast Michigan wants to use MC3. MCTI says, hey, we got the PACT. And so the answer to your question is I don't know what will happen with that, if it will be an MSG. I can say that this one is. So, I mean, when we build programs at the school, it's important that we try to connect our curriculum as much as possible to some national credentials. And this is a perfect example. So here's an MSG. This is we offer this in 10 weeks. I should have said that. This is a 10-week training program, but it's gonna come right off of someone coming out of assessment. So typically someone's here for 5 weeks for assessment. The ideal situation is just keep someone for 15 weeks. So, and if you're looking at time frames.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, thank you.
Are there other questions for Brian before we move on?
This is Craig. There is nothing else in the chat.
Thanks, Craig. So let's move on to another poll question. For apprenticeships, can we buy equipment for training? A for yes, B for no. Yeah, we gave you an easy one. Okay. So yes, 83%, no, 17%. Would someone like to put in why they answered yes and why they answered no? And the answer is yes, if determined the equipment is required and there are no other options available. Nobody's typing. Okay, so we'll go to the next one. Thank you, Gary. When is stability of employment achieved? A, at the end of the apprenticeship. B, when the individual is working and there are no further needs of VR services. Looks like we have 100% that say B. And I want to go back. I think there's a question in the chat.
Yes, this is Craig. Claude had asked about the previous question about things that MRS can pay for. Does this include accommodations?
Yes, that would include accommodations. Making sure, one, that the assessment is done to verify what that accommodation is. And that can include our occupational therapists who are able to provide that worksite evaluation, or rehabilitation specialists who are able to do some additional testing as well, to verify what accommodations need to be put in place and determine what equipment can be used. And that can be done during the apprenticeship process. I hope that answers your question, Claude. Thank you. Let's move on to I believe this is our last question. What will MRS not typically assist with? A, training supplies. B, tools, equipment for employment. C, food and housing. D, accommodation needs. Is that the final answer, guys? Okay. And the correct answer is C. Food and housing are not typically required to attend such trainings. Before moving forward, are there any questions?
This is Craig. Nothing in the chat at this time.
Awesome. So at this time, I would like to turn it over to Gary. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Keisha. So looking at conversation about MRS and apprenticeships, right now there is no direct MRS policy regarding apprenticeships. They are referenced in policy 3400. Apprenticeships can count towards both measurable skills gain and credential attainment. This is important. So we can see the definition of measurable skills gain, skill progression towards a recognized credential, and credential attainment, post-secondary degree or certificate. We acknowledge that both these definitions are not the full definitions. This is just kind of applying to today's conversation, which is about apprenticeships. If you have more specific questions regarding apprenticeships with your customer, you should contact or connect with your management and ultimately the policy unit. MRS customers during the vocational process should be informed of apprenticeships as an option if it makes sense as a training opportunity for them. You will also want to check to make sure it represents the least cost service to meet the needs of the new customer. Talked a little bit about that. This can take some review because different programs have different rules with respect of how they set up apprenticeships and how costs are covered. And you want to continue to review the viability of the program as it goes forward, because we all want to make sure that there's a job at the end of the process or at the end of the tunnel. When we think about closures or respect to closures, what we want to keep in mind is it's going to be a matter of what the actual job is that is secured at the end of the apprenticeship or the training. We as an agency seek employment stability. So this means that we would work with the individual until the employment is stable, which isn't necessarily at 90 days, could be longer. Registered apprenticeships, MSG and CA, it counts, and that's important to keep in mind. Although RSA is tracking our credential attainment and MSGs, along with other WIOA indicators at this time, they're only currently, or we are only currently being held responsible for measurable skills gain. Other indicator benchmarks are still being determined, and as we move forward into the future, obviously, RSA will put criteria for that as well. Participants in apprenticeships can obtain a certificate if enrolled in a post-secondary institution. It has to be in a program that leads to earning a credential. They can get MSGs along the way and a CA upon completion, and CAs can be measured by their school transcripts. Training milestones are satisfactory or better progress towards skill advancement while participating in the on-the-job training, OJT, registered apprenticeship program, or MCTI benchmark. Documentation can include employer verification, or should include employer verification. Most apprenticeships are accredited, but not all of them are. A lot of them already have defined benchmarks per the Department of Labor. So one example of that would be a plumber. Businesses or those providing RTI, colleges, technical training schools, or MCTI needs to determine trade-related benchmarks as part of the training plan. You can work with a business to figure out where the benchmarks are, which would be considered, again, MSGs. For example, the number of hours completed and/or skills obtained. Businesses need to provide documentation that the customer is achieving measurable skills gains. There needs to be a plan in place to get the documentation from the businesses along the way so you can have them as verification. A customer can obtain as many MSGs as attainable during the apprenticeship. However, only one counts per year for RSA requirements. MRS measures all MSGs to show the Bureau and legislature that our customers are progressing through trainings. The service must be in the IPE in order to count it as MSG, and it must match their employment goal. So this is the spot we want to open for questions. So we know we had some good questions along the way, but we'd like to, are there other questions that people might have? And you can put those in chat. Craig is monitoring them for those, or you could open up your mics and ask them verbally. There will be a 30-question quiz sent out after today's training. Just kidding. Any questions, please?
This is Anna. There are none in the chat at this time.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Craig. You can feel free to email anybody on this team if you have any questions after the training as well.
All right, so on behalf of the team, I'd like to thank everybody for coming today to our training. Again, we're here to help figure this animal out. Lots of knowledge here on the team, so reach out if you got questions. We're going to make sure that we get your questions answered. Thank you for your time, and everybody have a great day and a great weekend that's coming up.